Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of the pod. Now, I just want to say thank you to a couple of people who actually reached out and said they enjoyed the previous episodes. I can't believe anybody's listening. Maybe it's just those two people, but if that's the case, then thank you. I also apologize if you've just tuned in and to the Deluxe Mixing podcast and you're wondering why we never talk about mixing. We will get to it, but really the focus of this podcast is more about topics which are of interest and helpful to musicians and artists, as well as some general commentary on life, the universe, and everything as it relates to us as musical artists. Now, we're living in tricky times. I don't need to tell you that, and I'm sure we're all ground down to some degree by what's happening out there in the world. I recently saw something which I wanted to talk about with you, and that was a musical community which was insisting on there being no politics in the submissions of music. And this immediately, to me, raises a big red flag. Why? Aren't we tired of politics at this point? Yeah, well, we are. But you have to understand, from my perspective, music is one of the most powerful, biggest forces of change we've ever had throughout history. So the two things are interlinked. And if anybody suggests that music shouldn't have any form of political content, that's deeply problematic, and you can tell straight away what their agenda is. So today, Uncle Adam's going to give you a brief history lesson. You can leave now, or you can chill out. Up to you. Let's go back in time. Way back, further than James Brown would even say. When you hear about these civilizations like the Romans and Greeks, you probably remember they always seem to be marching somewhere with a huge army. And what do they have with those armies? They had, at the beginning, drummers pounding out a beat to rev up the troops, get them ready for battle, motivate them, keep them focused. Later on, they even had small bands playing songs, battle songs, to drive them forward. This in itself is a tool that they were using, a political tool. Later on, if you think about medieval Europe, we were all ruled by kings and queens, and the people had no power. If you were a peasant in the field, there was very little you could possibly do to change what was happening with the people that ruled over you. Terrible times. What happened? People started to write songs where they could carefully criticize what was happening and promote awareness and change. And the same with lots of early plays, political satire, this kind of thing. Ways to express yourself, express dissent, and spread messages through art. Even the church got in on the act. Now, you don't really think of the church having any kind of politics, but trust me, they did. When the Reformation was happening, there were lots of hymns which had questionable lyrical content, as they would say about our music today, criticizing the authority of the Catholic Church. So, again, a political tool for expressing the topic of the day and sharing the message. Let's go forward a little bit more and talk about things like the American Revolution. Now, I'm sure we can all name lots of songs we learned in our childhood if you spent any time growing up in America. I don't know, Yankee Doodle Dandy, good example. It's kind of nursery rhymey, but you know what? It's about defying the British, defying the king, and helping create national identity. What is that? That is straight up politics. A little bit later, a little bit of backstory. When I was very young, my mother remarried a black American serviceman, and we moved to inner city Philadelphia for a little while. There was no white people around for miles in any direction, and at the time, it was not widely accepted to have an interracial marriage from either side, to be quite honest with you. So I saw firsthand and experienced firsthand the challenges which were happening within civil rights and racism. The plus side was they had a very big family, and I had lots of aunts and uncles, several of which had moved out or joined the army or whatever, and left behind a killer record collection full of soul and funk and all of this great music. You know, your Marvin Gaye, What's Going On, War, tons of funk music, James Brown, stuff that I hadn't been exposed to as a little white kid in England previously. All of this played a massive role in the civil rights movement, addressed racism, and helped move society forward. I don't understand, and I've never understood how you could be into music and be racist, considering this is literally the genesis of everything else that has come since. We could also look at the obvious stuff. You know, our parents or whatever, they loved, you know, Bob Dylan, Jimi Hendrix, Neil Young. Again, protesting war, expressing frustration with what the old people at that time were doing, how they were running the country, challenging authority, heavy-duty politics. And this continued. This continued, let's say, in England in punk rock. Punk rock was, again, a revolution against the establishment. God Save the Queen, the fascist regime. Can you imagine how frustrating it was to be living a dead-end life when the royal family were riding around on a royal yacht, having vacations in Mustique, paid for by the taxpayer, and you felt completely powerless? How did you get power? You started a revolution with punk. You expressed yourself. Bands like The Clash, or in the US, similar things were happening at the same time. I don't know, like the Dead Kennedys. Very, very political. Promoting change, challenging authority, challenging the establishment. And this continued worldwide. There's countless examples around the world expressing frustration and change. This obviously continued into the most obvious example, Rage Against the Machine. Anybody who doesn't understand Rage Against the Machine is political, or System of a Down, or recently we had Gojira at the Olympics, who are expressing their often quite political views regarding things like the planet. If anybody says politics doesn't belong in music, well, they haven't really listened to much music. Now, I'm going to lay a woo-woo theory on you, and it's that I believe music ultimately is a force for good. You don't find a great deal of bands, musicians, artists who are in fact evil and negative. So I want to briefly tell you about a little hilarious thing that happened when I was a kid. Now, there was a bipartisan political movement to enforce censorship upon the lyrics of the music which we were loving as kids, and sticker it. We still have stickering today, but honestly, it's used as a marketing tool. It backfired. Ooh, it's got controversial lyrics. Yes, please. But these people basically believe that we should be protected from the lyrical ideas that were put into music, that this devil rock was somehow going to turn us into murderers and psychopaths. Well, it didn't. Bad news. First of all, yeah, we did listen to this music, and as kids, we were quite able to understand it, either view it as comedy or for effect, maybe investigate some kind of lyrical themes, but it wasn't turning us into psychopaths. I can promise you, if hip-hop had not come along and be able to shout out loud, fuck the police, the world will be a worse place than it is today. So these people, they got destroyed. Why? Because artists, you people, are not always as dumb as we look. People like Frank Zappa absolutely tore them apart, ripped their arguments to shreds. People like unlikely people like Dee Snider, he's the singer in ridiculous kind of glam rock heavy metal band. However, very astute, very capable of tearing apart these kind of arguments in court. If you fancy some amusement someday of watching the establishment get destroyed by artists, I recommend you watch it. You'll see Blackie Lawless of Wasp tearing apart senators. You'll love it. Going back in the day, hip-hop, topics like police brutality, racism, what's happening on both sides of the drug culture. Again, all super political. Never let anyone stifle you. So, going back a little bit, sorry, I went off piste there. I truly believe music is a force for good. Not that I am hugely religious, but back in the olden days, when classical music was the only real kind of music, somebody, I don't know who, I really should look it up, said that music was the face of God. Now, if you believe in something, or even believe in humanity, it's entirely possible that it exists as a force for good, which is why it's always been part of the fabric of social change and progress. And that is why, my dear friends, never trust anybody who says there shouldn't be politics in music. Thank you for bearing with me for today's rant. I hope it was a semi-enjoyable history lesson. Maybe it wasn't. I do apologize. And I hope you join me again. I shall see you again on the next episode of the pod.